So on my channel, I try to be a little bit more positive and talk about players when they're playing a lot better. I don't necessarily love being negative about players or about organizations, but today we're going to switch things up because we're currently in the All-Star break and I want some content to talk about. And halfway through the season, these are my five most bad situations or my 5 worst situations for every organization in the NBA. And what I mean by 5 worst organizations or 5 worst situations is what teams are in the darkest situations, meaning they have some bad contracts, they've made bad decisions, they have some injury decisions, or they just have some injury luck that isn't falling their way. All these things that can really go into a bad situation for a team. And before I get started, this is not in order, so you're not going to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I do mean 5, this is just the 5th team I'm talking about, not the 5th worst situation.
This second nature, putting belt to the paper. These lines gon' shake pavement like Lucas trade to the Lakers. A fine bitch taker, we riding waves in Jamaica. I put my chin to the sky and give thanks that I'm not a hater. Wood grain, take a steer in my life. Robbers raised the kids, so you won't catch me with fear in the eye. Thank God, another celebration, put beer in the sky. Clean glasses every other night, cause I'm me and that's tight.
And starting off, I do want to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans not being on my 5 worst situations, because a lot of people will look at the New Orleans Pelicans and say, oh, they're at the bottom of the Western Conference. They have an injury-riddled Zion Williamson. I do think the Pelicans are in a better situation than the 5 teams that I'm about to mention, because Zion Williamson, when he has been healthy, has looked really good. They're about to have a top 5 pick in this upcoming draft, which is a really good draft. They still have a lot of tradable assets in DeJounte Murray and CJ McCollum. Herb Jones is one of the better perimeter defenders in the league, and Trey Murphy has made a significant jump this season. And in Herb Jones just being a better on-ball creator and just being a lot more efficient as a shooter, averaging about 20 plus points per game, I think he has improved to the point where you have a lot of very promising young players on this team, and you're about to add another one through the draft. So the first team I want to talk about is the Phoenix Suns. Now, going into the All-Star break, the Phoenix Suns are currently 1 game under 500, I believe, 26 and 28. I think they have one of the hardest schedules for the rest of the season, and it looks like this team is just completely disinterested. Kevin Durant is almost halfway out the door already, and I think Devin Booker is going to be following right behind him. And I would say one of the biggest storylines to this season has been the Jimmy Butler saga, and it looked like the Phoenix Suns were the team that was in the lead to go get Jimmy Butler. The Phoenix Suns traded their 2030 or 2031 draft pick to go get 3 first-round picks that looked like they were going to be attached to a Jimmy Butler deal so they can bring in Jimmy Butler, because even though Jimmy Butler did not look like he was that interested with Miami this season, we all still believed in the star that Jimmy Butler is and how he could be once he's locked in with a new team in a new situation. Now, there's one thing holding that up. And I think this is the one thing that is the reason and the core reason why the Phoenix Suns are in the situation, and that is Bradley Beal. Now, coming into this trade, Bradley Beal was a guy that averaged 20 plus points per game. He was a really solid scorer for the Washington Wizards. But the only thing is, he's going to be making 50 plus million over the next 3 seasons. And the worst part about it, he has a no trade clause. So there were multiple teams that were willing to bring in Bradley Beal and take on that contract, but the problem is Bradley Beal has the no trade clause. Therefore, Bradley Beal has all the leverage in the NBA, or all the leverage for the Phoenix Suns to say, I don't want to get moved here. I don't want to get moved here. I don't want to play for this team. And the Suns have to abide by that because there is a no trade clause in his contract. Therefore, holding up any other trade that the Phoenix Suns could make, including Bradley Beal, and with this team being in the second apron, there's almost little to no moves that they could make with Bradley Beal or with any other players. So while the top end talent in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant is really great, they have a really bad supporting cast with guys like Tyus Jones, who's been extremely underwhelming this season, Jusuf Nurkic, who is one of the worst starting centers in the NBA, and just some really inconsistent depth pieces, guys like Ryan Dunn or Royce O'Neal, who just been very inconsistent this season. And just to put in some context, Bradley Beal over the next few seasons, this season he's going to be making $50 million for the rest of the season. Next year he's going to be making $53.6 million, and the 26-27 season he's going to have a $57 million player option, $57 million player option that he would be crazy if he doesn't accept. So over the next 3 seasons, you're going to paying a guy in Bradley Beal that's averaging about 18 points per game on about a 60% true shooting, which once again would not be bad if this was a guy making $20 to $25 million a year, but Bradley Beal is making $50 million a year. He is top 10 most paid players this season in the NBA. If we take a look at the other guys that are making $50 million, those are guys like Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, and Joel Embiid. And all of those guys fully healthy produce a lot more, almost double to triple the amounts of Bradley Beal. And there's also the injury concern. Last season, he played about 53 games, and he was really bad in the playoffs, like really bad. Last season in the playoffs, Bradley Beal averaged about 16.5 points on 3.5 turnovers and 54% true shooting. He was just completely locked up by that Minnesota Timberwolves team. And this whole Phoenix Suns roster was kind of shell-shocked by that Minnesota Timberwolves team and the defense that they played on them. So with the reports that the Phoenix Suns have made, if they don't get Jimmy Butler, it looks like they're probably going to be trading Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, which is not a bad thing at all. And it looks like Houston is going to be willing to give up those Phoenix Suns picks so they can bring in a guy like Devin Booker. So when I say the situation isn't all bad, but Bradley Beal kind of makes this situation one of the 5 worst in the NBA. And if we take a look at some of the picks that the Phoenix Suns will be having coming up in the next few years, they have a least favorable pick between Cleveland or Minnesota. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be Cleveland's pick, and it's probably going to be between 26 and 30. In 2026, they have a least favorable between Orlando, Memphis, and Washington. It's probably going to be Memphis's pick, and I'm sure that's going to be outside of the lottery. In 2027, least favorable between Cleveland, Minnesota, and Utah, and the same could be said in 2028. Least favorable between Phoenix, Washington, Brooklyn, and Philadelphia. This one I'm kind of optimistic on because the Philadelphia 76ers will be talked about later in this video. And then they have the least favorable out of their pick, Washington and Brooklyn. I don't necessarily think Washington and Brooklyn are going to be competing for any type of championship in 2028. You never know. Cooper Flag might come in and be the best thing since sliced bread. In 2029, they have a least favorable between Cleveland, Minnesota, and Utah. 2030, Phoenix, Washington, and Memphis. And in 2031, they have no first round pick. So it looks like it's going to be some very dark days ahead of Phoenix, but if they trade Devin Booker to the Houston Rockets and get their picks back, this could be salvated just a little bit. I said salvated, I meant salvaged. The next team we're going to be talking about is the Atlanta Hawks, who have drafted one of the better point guards or the more talented point guards we have seen over the past 25 seasons. And no, I'm not talking about Luka Doncic. I'm talking about Trae Young, the guy that they traded for on draft night. And since drafting Trae Young, they just have not been able to put the level of talent around Trae Young that would really use him or really help him succeed for the Atlanta Hawks. If we just look at the year they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and since then, in 2020, 2021, they went 41-31. I believe they were the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and lost to the Milwaukee Bucks. The following season, they went 43-39 and lost in the first round. The following season after that, 2022, 2023, they went 41-41 and lost in the first round. In 2023, 2024, they go 36-46 and miss the playoffs. And this season, the 2024-2025 season, they are currently 26-29, and it is to be determined. And with Jalen Johnson out, and it just looks like the Atlanta Hawks are trading away all their talent. They traded away DeAndre Hunter. They traded away Bogdan Bogdanovic. Clint Capella is on the last year of his deal, which I doubt he's going to be re-signed. You just would think that this Atlanta Hawks team would really try and put as much talent around Trae as they possibly can without having their draft picks for the next few years and trying to just be competitive in a play-in scenario or maybe at the bottom of the Eastern Conference playoff standings. But it just looks like they're completely shifting towards trying to move Trae Young and just get as much value as they possibly can. And another thing I want to talk about with this Atlanta Hawks team is the incompetence when it comes to the trading or when it comes to drafting. You trade for a guy like DeJounte Murray, giving up multiple future picks in the process, where DeJounte Murray is more of a ball-dominant type of guard, and you tried to play him at the 2 guard next to Trae Young, and that just did not work. DeJounte Murray is not an off-ball player, and Trae Young has never been an off-ball player in my opinion. Now, in theory, you would love Trae Young to be an on-ball player, but we just have not seen enough of it for me to be confident saying that he could be moved to an off-ball type of role. So obviously that did not turn out. So they end up sending DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans, and they get back a really good return in Dyson Daniels, which has been a very big home run for them this season. And about halfway through the season, it looked like Atlanta was going to be a play-in team. You know, it looked like they had a really good opportunity of being a 7th or 8th seed in this Western Conference or the Eastern Conference, with the Philadelphia 76ers being banged up, the Indiana Pacers starting out really slow, and the Milwaukee Bucks starting out really slow at the time. But Jalen Johnson goes down and he's going to be out for the rest of the year. Like I already said, you trade Bogdan Bogdanovic, you trade DeAndre Hunter, which is some more talent that you had on this roster before Jalen Johnson went out. And now you're just going to be playing with Trae Young and really negative offensive assets. And let's just take a look at some of their draft picks ever since drafting Trae Young. In 2019, they had 2 first-round picks, and they drafted Cam Reddish and Jackson Hayes, 2 guys who are now on the Los Angeles Lakers. In 2020, you draft Onyeka Okongwu with the 6th pick in the draft, and he is just now becoming a starting center for the Atlanta Hawks. I don't necessarily think that's a home run. In 2021, you get your home run in Jalen Johnson, who I think is phenomenal, but I'm starting to get a little bit concerned with his injury history and how healthy he can be for the upcoming seasons. And in 2022, you draft AJ Griffin, who is currently out of the league. And before he went out of the league, I think he was traded to the Houston Rockets. In 2023, you draft Kobe Buffkin, who I have not seen pan out as much so far. And then in 2024, you do get the number 1 pick in the draft, but out of 2021, 22, and 23, also including 2025 coming up, this is the one season where having the first pick in the draft isn't the biggest home run that you would want it to be. And then the best prospect in the draft, in my opinion, in Alex Sarr, or at least one of the best, the top 3 prospect in the draft in Alex Sarr, which was probably the consensus number 1 pick, did not want to go to Washington, so you have to settle for Zachary Risache, who shows a lot of life as a really good 3-and-D player in the future, but as of right now is one of the worst finishers in the league, one of the worst volume 3-point shooters in the league, and he's just a really raw prospect that's going to take a lot of time. So in my opinion, I just think Atlanta has done a really bad job of surrounding Trae Young with the necessary assets for them to be a competitive type of team for years to come, and they've just dropped the ball in multiple different situations. Now, I'm going to try and make this quick because I've talked about this team so many times over the past few weeks, and that is the Dallas Mavericks. Now, this Dallas Mavericks team, if I were to say there were some tiers between these really bad situations, in all of these teams, between the Suns, the Hawks that we've already talked about, the Dallas Mavericks are probably a tier away from them, and probably in another tier with another team that's going to be on this video, because the Dallas Mavericks have a window to where they can be a really good playoff team and a fringe contender in the NBA. With Anthony Davis, with Kyrie Irving, they traded away Luka Doncic, which has made their 7 to 10 year window go all the way down to 2 years. So we've talked about this multiple times, so I'm not going to really dive into it as much, but I do know that the Dallas Mavericks don't have their picks past 2027, and that's probably when Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis are probably going to really start declining, and they're probably going to be a lottery team or fringe playoff team, and to not have their picks in those dates is going to be very scary because this team is already all in on a championship. They're not necessarily a championship level type of team. So they trade away Luka Doncic. They narrow down their 10-year to 7-year window into 2 years. You might lose a season with Anthony Davis and Anthony Davis and Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively just being out already. So this is a really bad situation, but it's the best of a bad one. Now, the next team I want to talk about is the Philadelphia 76ers, because I truly believe Joel Embiid will not get back to the level that we have seen him at in previous years. I don't think Joel Embiid is going to be at the level where he was at in the 2022-2023 season where he won MVP, and I don't think he'll be at the pre-injury days of the 2023 and 2024 season. I think Joel Embiid, sadly, the injuries are really starting to pile up, and I think him going to the Team USA or just going to play in the Olympics has really kind of fast forwarded the process. I think Joel Embiid already being hobbled in the playoffs right before the Olympics and then going to play in the Olympics was very reckless. And you see the Clippers, they pulled out Kawhi Leonard because they weren't confident in how healthy he was, and they wanted him to rest as much as they possibly could. And I believe the Philadelphia 76ers should have done the same thing. On top of having a Joel Embiid play in the Olympics while he was hobbled in the playoffs, you had all this money in free agency, and who did you give it to? You gave it to Paul George. And we're not even going to talk about how bad Paul George has been this season. This season, Paul George is averaging about 16 points per game on negative true shooting efficiency. He just has not been engaged on the offensive and defensive end, and it looks a little lackadaisical now that he has gotten paid. Your star rookie in Jared McCain, who I believe has been very good and would have been clearly the rookie of the year if he was still playing. He got hurt earlier in the season and will be out for the rest of the season. And the only bright spot has been Tyrese Maxey and how he has been playing. But what makes this so bad to me is we've seen throughout all the teams I've been talking about, there has been one reason, in my opinion, or one big reason why I look at this team and be like, they're not in the best situation. And for the Suns, it was Bradley Beal and his contract. For the Atlanta Hawks, it was them not having their picks, and San Antonio having their picks and them trading away all the talent that they have and just not being able to purposely or just really consistently build a supporting cast that Trae Young could win with. And for the Dallas Mavericks, it's just narrowing down their championship window from 7 to 10 years to maybe 2 to 3 years. And for the Philadelphia 76ers, obviously it's Joel Embiid's injury concerns, but they have a top 6 protected pick this season. And once Joel Embiid went down, I would have shut him down. And you know what? We're just going to be a really bad team this year. We're going to get a 6th pick in the draft. We're going to draft a guy like Ace Bailey. We're going to draft a guy like Colin Murray Boyles, or draft a guy like Trey Johnson. Just somebody to where we can get some more younger assets just in case Joel Embiid is not the player that we would want him to be anymore. Instead, they're still playing Joel Embiid very inconsistent minutes throughout the season. He is not 100%. It's clear as day he's not 100%, and they're probably going to either get into the play-in as the 10 seed or be right outside of the play-in. So they're either going to make the play-in, play 2 extra games, and then get their ass bust by Cleveland, or they're just going to miss the play-in entirely and not get their pick out of it and be paying Paul George for 3 more years. So sadly, as sad as it is, because Joel Embiid is going to finish as one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, and it's completely sad because he's one of the most talented players I have ever seen and one of the best scorers at the big man position the league has ever seen. And if he could have just put together some really healthy seasons, I feel as though the whole narrative on him would be different. And last but not least, one of the worst situations in the NBA is the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls, where do I start? I just think it's really incompetence from the front office. You know, I think the drafting, the trading, the timing of the trades, they're all just not good. Now, to start this off pretty early, the Chicago Bulls are 4th in attendance on a nightly basis in the NBA behind the Dallas Mavericks, the New York Knicks, and the Philadelphia 76ers at about 19.7 thousand fans a night. So when you look at ownership and you have ownership that doesn't necessarily care about the product on the floor, but more about the money that's coming in, you're going to have a team that is kind of lackadaisical, kind of half-assed, just good enough to find their way into the postseason or find their way into the play-in, but not really be contenders. And I feel like that's what the Chicago Bulls have been really cool with for a very long time. And now it looks like they're starting to move into a direction. But then again, the incompetence of this front office is really showing me that this team probably won't be able to contend until this front office is directed by someone else. And there were about 4 players on this team. There are about 4 players on this team that had very high trade value, and you waited way too long to get off of them. Either you waited way too long to get off of them and their trade value died down, or you just didn't accept the right amount of value for them. And those 4 players are DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic. And to start with Alex Caruso, halfway through the 2023-2024 season, there were a lot of contending teams that would have given you multiple first-round picks for Alex Caruso because of the point-of-attack defense that he does provide and the lack of point-of-attack defense that some of these contending teams really have. Instead of trading Alex Caruso at the trade deadline, you now wait to the offseason, and the move is Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey straight up. You traded Alex Caruso to the team with the most first-round picks over the next 7 years for not a single draft pick. Up next, DeMar DeRozan, another guy who had an extreme amount of value. You wait till the offseason, and you don't even get the picks in the situation. San Antonio gets the picks in the situation. And not only that, San Antonio realized their incompetence, and the next season around the trade deadline, they're like, you know what? You guys are coming back. You guys are coming back. Hey, Chicago, you're going to give Zach LaVine to the Kings. We're going to give you guys your already top 10 protected pick that was probably going to be in the top 10 anyway, because you guys are just inside of the play and probably about to fall out. And you guys are probably going to get your pick back anyway. But you know what? We're just going to give it to you, and you're going to have this pick now that it can be 13th, 14th, 11th, 12th. It doesn't matter. But now you have 17 point guards. You still haven't traded Nikola Vucevic, and all the players that you had of value that you could have gotten multiple first round picks back, you've gotten nothing. Nikola Vucevic was a really good offensive center this season. He's been great, and you still have not moved him. And now you have a roster of Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, I think it's Trey Jones, Zach Collins. You also have Matas Buzelis, who I think has been really good, and he's going to show that he's going to be one of the better rookies in this draft post All-Star break. But this is just really bad. This is really bad from a front office standpoint. And the worst part about this is they're still not bad enough to be in the play-in. And in the Western Conference, they probably be bottom 3. But this is not the Western Conference. This is the Eastern Conference, where there are a lot of really bad teams. So now you're probably going to be in the play-in. And since you're in the play-in, you're like, you know what? We're going to just build on what we have, because I believe we have a contender unfolding right before our eyes. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, those were the 5 worst situations in the NBA, in my opinion. If you guys like this type of content, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what type of videos you guys would like to see next, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.